burrito-powered human shirt this week because one of the people I work with told me I am going to turn into a burrito at my day job recently because that is absolutely all I eat at work. This is instead of the gifts. Today, I'm going to be breaking down last week's animation, the Saber Duel. Not going to say the Lightsaber word. I don't really know why I'm concerned. Like you can use the word. It's just it is a trademarked word. So I figured I just wouldn't. Other people can own their own things. But this is clearly like a fan filmy kind of deal, right? I shot this years ago with two friends in the backyard of where we lived at the time. That nice orange gradient horizon is actually like a bank next door. Might look at actually the live action shots here in a minute and can kind of look at what the actual footage looked like and what we turned it into with the rotoscope afterwards. So shot it quite a long time ago. There's a couple funny stories about this animation. One is, as you can see, I started animating pretty much entirely in 24 frames per second. I was newer to rotoscope. I was new enough that I didn't understand a ton about what kinds of frame rates I could and couldn't use. And I just figured, well, I'm shooting it with the camera in 24 frames per second, so I better animate it in that. And so I animated every frame for every character. There was like a hold there kind of at the beginning. This one right here is like it. Got my little color swatches there. But then it's 24, and of course it's very time consuming. And it looks good. There's nothing wrong, actually. If I would have done the whole animation in 24, it's not like it's too smooth. It's kind of nice. It's kind of good. I stuck to 24 frames per second. For the rest of the animation, that is not the case. I hold as long as possible, as often as possible. Look at this workspace here at these where they're both characters are back in frame. Look at how long I'm holding some of these frames compared to every possible frame 24 times every second. And that was because I realized I don't have to put a frame for every character every 1/24th of a second. Big motivation for that was just time, was just my ability to work on this project, and I wanted to finish it. And so I realized in learning more about variable frame rates, a lot of animations just using a 12 frames per second, final product, I decided I'm going to hold, especially some of these like longer moments you can hold before like the action is kind of delivered. I'm gonna hold some of these, 2 or 3, maybe even 4 frames long. And that was tremendously helpful. And it still looks good. If you watch the video start to finish without knowing this, I don't think you'll think, wait, so for the first like 5 seconds, it's really, really smooth. And then by the end, it like kind of, it's not like jarring. It's probably not advisable. You should pick a style and be fairly consistent. Don't be afraid to experiment, but don't try new stuff in the middle of like a final product, something that's going to be like a delivered, here's a film, here's a short film, whatever, here's a scene. Don't like experiment and then just like ship it out. That's probably not a great idea. But I was working on this actually several years ago and just kind of slowed down. I started a new full-time job and stopped animating a lot. When I picked it up last year, this would have been as far as I made it when I initially started it some years ago. So this up to this point that you're seeing right here is essentially a copy of the OG original save file. And I started animating from here. The first shot is right almost exactly 9 seconds long. Maybe it is exactly 9 seconds long. And as you can see, it's unfinished here. This is where I left off. It was like 2018 or 19. It was so long ago. When I picked it up, I finished these first 9 seconds. I exported the video so I could like watch it and upload it to Google Drive and like show my friends. And I continued on to this second shot. And I made it about here, I'd say, on just the line work. So that's about 2 to 2.5 seconds, maybe 2 or 3 seconds worth of line work. And then Animate crashed and I lost the whole project file. I lost everything I had worked on last year. All I had was the original save file, which this is technically a copy of, going back to here. So of course, if I had actually lost for good all the second half of this first shot, I probably would have given it up and never touched it again because it was many, many hours of work. There's 2 characters, right? We have like maybe almost 5 seconds worth of animation, 4.5. That's like 9 or 10 seconds of line work on one character as a comparable example. 9 or 10 seconds of line work on a full-size human with like clothing that's moving around and a prop in hand and lots of motion is many hours of work, many days throughout many weeks of work when I was working on this project alone. Fortunately, this bit up to 9 seconds I had exported in the full resolution. I had pretty much the final shot that I needed. And so that was fortuitous. I still, however, had lost this. These like 2 or 3 seconds worth of line work on this guy. As you can see from this layer right here, I'm holding a lot more. I'm sticking more to 12 frames per second, and there's a couple holds here that are more like 3 frames long over 2, just to hold the motion a little bit, kind of slows down, and then he picks back up, and I lost that. And I was so frustrated. I put the project down for a long time, and it was like maybe 2 or 3 months later when the sting of Animate, stabbing me in the back had finally waned a bit. I decided I really do want to finish this project, so I sat down, laboring over those frames I had already done once and then doing them again, and it took a few days. I got caught back up within Adobe Animate. I don't have these frames. The second half of that first shot, totally gone. I have no frames for them. I just have the exported file that I got before I lost the project. Something else I learned was that last year in 2023, I realized mid-project, somewhere around when this crash happened, I realized I was still using Adobe Animate 2018 because I thought the software just updated automatically. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. If it does, I had it turned off. And I was troubleshooting something and I was looking at a YouTube tutorial and I realized, why does their interface look so different from mine? This video came out like 6 months ago. And I realized it was because I hadn't updated my Adobe Animate. So I did that. There were some new features that were kind of cool. Once I had updated and continued working on the project, it was smooth sailing from there. Lessons learned: keep backups. I have probably a dozen or more backups at variable stages. I know Adobe Animate does its automatic recovery, or maybe you can turn that off too, but I have that turned on where it makes recovery project files that I have. This one is named something like recover_third shot finished.fla. But here we are, and we have the finished file. Something interesting about this is there's some freehand animation in this. There's nothing crazy. People freehand animate everything. Rotoscope's not terribly popular, but this antagonist, picks up this debris. Definitely not an SITH, just an antagonist with a red sword. It's good to know the principles of motion because there's like a force acting on the debris, and then it kind of starts to fall before he gives it the horizontal force. I think the shot came out extremely well. Up and immensely satisfying. So that was just free-handed. As well as, of course, this, I think, kind of poorly done, like smoke cloud, whatever. I like this one a little bit better. This one, it looks like a cartoon, smoke cloud. The initial impact, I'm not super happy with. We also shot this in the snow. You can almost see right here. You see how you can't see all of the Definitely Not JEDI's foot. It's because his foot is like partially in the snow. And sometimes I just make up for it and added a little depth. And sometimes I kind of wasn't as good at it because they were standing in the snow. They may have been mostly on top of it. We cleared an area to work on. So this was a wild ride. I gave up on it like twice over the course of a couple years. I changed frame rates midway through, had to freehand some stuff, which I normally try to avoid. I just like to rotoscope a scene with characters talking and doing their thing. When I initially shot this, I didn't understand some of the challenges of like me just standing and like moving the camera around meant I was gonna have to mess with the background. You can see in this first shot, it's pretty choppy. I like have some times where I like rescale it really quickly, like right there. What is that? It's because I'm moving and the background is warping. And it'd be one thing if I was just sliding, that would have worked kind of better. I'm like rotating, and so the background dimensions are changing. I wasn't going to redraw the background every frame. Good grief. I learned a lot about the kind of backgrounds that you want to shoot on, and the flatter you can keep it with rotoscope, the better. You just want the background, and there it is. If you're shooting and then you rotate the camera, the background has to change accordingly. So you can just create a background where part of it that goes out of camera already is warped, the way a panorama shot on some phones will do, like that panorama shot thing. And if you zoomed way in, it would probably look normal within frame. But then if you were to hand the background, the contents in the background would warp accordingly because it would have been created that way. So that's something that could work. I did not take any of that into account when I shot this because I was much younger and had rotoscoped very little and was like, I want to do like a scene, like a 20, 30-second little duel, and it'll be real actiony and we'll see what it looks like. And I didn't realize how much trouble I was going to have with the backgrounds, how much trouble it was going to be to move shots and then have to do new backgrounds, how troublesome it was going to be when I'm moving the camera. And for example, a thing that you see here is I don't always move the characters when the background moves if there's a frame hold, as you can see here. But I had to move the background because like I moved the camera a bunch at that particular moment and I kind of needed to keep up. Not executed super well. Also, just as a cinematography standpoint, I don't have the characters centered super well. You can't see here. It gets better right about here. Look at where the characters are. First, second is okay. Okay, so they're chilling in like the upper left corner kind of now. Their blades are going out of shot. And then, yeah, as you see, I kind of pan up here and they get centered a little bit better. But we're seeing way too much of the ground right now. Look how much it's just dead space. And you can kind of see some of the horizon. And there's a whole bunch of this building. It was a really fun project to do a teeny bit of choreography. I think this, for not being professionally choreographed and for us pretty much coming up with it in one day, some of these are really good. And if the blocking protagonist didn't block, he would have actually been just bonked. So for us being not professional choreographers or swordsmen, it went extremely well, I think. We just shot it in like an hour. It's like, let's just make up some choreography. The antagonist will do all of the attacking in the first shot, and the good guy will be on the defensive, always for defense, never for attack. I won't do it in like the voice, because again, everything's copyrighted. And then when the good guy makes his little comeback here, we switch to him doing all of the aggressing kind of swings. Boo! Does a little 360, does a little whoa, 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 whoa. It's interesting to look at the different frame rates that I used. Some are held really long, but I think the biggest thing that I learned working on this project is regarding backgrounds. Good grief. Ethan, use a tripod or rotate less when you're going to have a pretty dynamic background, because I synced the background just the same way I would rotoscope over the characters. I create this little thing here. I typically convert it to symbol, and then I just drag it over the live action background. I don't know why I haven't bothered to show what that looks like. So as you can see, I'm just trying to move. Oh, and we have this door here. This door, we used to throw throwing knives at. It was a ton of fun. It's all like marked up. This was totally spotless when we got it, I think. And we chipped away at like half the wood throwing knives and like shuriken at it. We were a bunch of nerds. And I had to kind of go around that and kind of guess where the lines would be. And having to try to move the background with my jerky little camera movements, not easy. So take great care about where you shoot. With live action, that's like half the thing. You can't just shoot anywhere. You create sets and you do all kinds of stuff. With rotoscope, you can kind of get lazy since you can shoot anywhere and then take out the background. But in this case, I wanted to keep the background reminiscent of where we were shooting, and just so I could have kind of like a top of a sci-fi building, things in place, like this garage being a building and our back porch being, I don't know, looks like a landing pad almost. Here's something that I think is really cool, is the way we did his little, when he grabs the sword, is we just have our other actor standing there and he just grabs it. Look at that. You're so sneaky with it. Movie magic. And there it is the whole time. And then he swings it around. We put padding on around one of the blades because we wanted them to not break. This one actually did break. I think I was technically borrowing it from a friend. I don't remember. Maybe he did give it to me, but I broke it. And it was like an old, haven't been made in years, LIGHT that you would get from Hastings. Not like the new dueling sabers you can just get on the internet. It was old, and like some of the first ones that came out of that style. And we broke it. Broke like the bulb on the inside, but that's okay. The video's good. Okay, let's take a minute to look at the live footage that we shot for this project. What I did was went into Premiere and I made the edits that, like, I edited the shots how I wanted them. You do that first, so you're never animating more than you need to and then editing it later, right? So you can tell, I'm actually just gonna skip in for a second. After this shot, right, I cut the live footage to exactly what I wanted to be animated. Have our characters going at it, really whacking each other. Bah, that would have hit him. Boom, boom, boom. And a little force push. We had some cardboard there. We were going to fight on the cardboard. We ended up not. I used text to help cue myself when I animated when I wanted certain things to happen. So smoke cloud, then it dissipates. grabs that, boom, 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 whack to the head, had a little padding there. You can see also cars going by up here, I think, yeah. Hence, like, there was just no using any of the natural sound, not really, because it was going to be too much of a disaster. Some wonders of rotoscope. You can see this man is wearing a shirt and a pair of shorts, and the belt for him, the belt for both, well, no, the belt for this guy wasn't too hard because it was just like the lining of his, these are like compression tights or long johns or something. But with this, let's call him the protagonist, as you can see, I tried to make it like a belt, and it's almost like he's wearing a tunic that kind of came down over the top of his legs. Sometimes I just had to make up where the belt was going to be. It ended up working out. A couple frames from one to another, the belt kind of changes in verticality really quickly, but I guarantee you didn't notice that on your first watch through. So like I talked about in the first breakdown in January, things from frame to frame, it's not about lining it up with 100% precision, because in some cases I'm animating something that isn't actually there. I am rotoscoping the characters, but there's times where I'm putting a line in their hair that I'm going to do every frame, so they kind of have like a hair part or like a swoop, or the fact that I didn't do any hair for this guy. I didn't give him any of his hair. He's even got like kind of a beard, and I just ignored that. But sometimes you're animating things that aren't there, and if it moves around a little bit, when it's 1/12 of a second, the final motion is what you critique as being good or bad. You don't look at one frame and say, "Oh, this frame looks kind of bad." Well, it isn't anything. It's like looking at, I don't know, like a severed human hand and thinking, you know, they need to wash their hands more. No, they have bigger problems. Like, your hand is as useful as it is connected to the rest of your body. You cut a hand off, it ceases to be a hand in a way that's relevant. And it's kind of a weird example, but one frame on its own really isn't anything in animation. But when all of the frames are in their proper place, when they're ordered correctly, when there is some minor, some little goofs or some deviations or some wiggles, that's okay, because the final product is the motion. And if someone's belt, you know, around their waist from frame to frame kind of moves, that's okay, because it's all motion, everything's flowing. If a character's holding still, but you're still animating every frame and you're not just holding one long frame, and then, you know, there's like parts of them that are like moving around, that would be weird, right? You can't be incompetent, but you're creating motion, you're creating a finished project in which the exact particularities of one frame becomes blended into the particularities of the whole. I found myself, in retrospect, a lot of my animations I've worked on, I've spent way too much time on one frame, obsessing over, like, I'll do a line and then go, ooh, I kind of cut into like his thigh too much. I need to like erase that line and line it up better. And that's fine if it was like a terrible line that's out of place, but sometimes you lose time overthinking what you're trying to do and not actually thinking, is this going to affect the finished product? Especially when we're talking about clothing, which is moving and flowing. If we look at the protagonist's shorts or his shirt, there's always wrinkles. It's always moving forward and back, and my camera unfocuses and refocuses, and wrinkles can move around and go crazy. And as long as you're not adding too many lines when there shouldn't be, because sometimes less is more, it's a great saying. As long as you're being tasteful with how you use wrinkles in the outline of clothing, things can move around quite a bit. And if the final motion is good, then that frame is doing its job and it's ordered, it's in its proper place. And animation is just taking a bunch of frames that on their own are just pictures, just still pictures. This would be a fine picture. Cool, there it is. But when you put a whole bunch of them together and you order them properly, and when they have the right frame rate, when they move together at the right pace, and when the right colors are in the right places, you can get something very beautiful at the end of it, very exciting, very, you know, enjoyable. So, you know, don't overthink your lines. Don't overthink, you know, do I have to animate every frame 24 times every second? Maybe not. Maybe you can hold a frame for like 4 seconds, you know. There's a lot you can do. There's a lot of fun you can have. Experiment, try new things. Good grief. I mean, when you watch this live action, it's so kind of janky and weird. And the final product is pretty good. Syncing up the background to this porch was kind of a nightmare. As you know, there were no stairs, and I didn't do the railing. And bleh. Glad the project's done. I really like it. I'm happy with it. Woo, 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 woo. So this is just the little sort of behind the scenes little story about how this animation was produced. It's pretty short. It shouldn't have taken, you know, like technically like 4.5 years or 4 years or whatever to make, simply because I kept putting it down. I initially put it down for several years and got away from rotoscope entirely. to work more on live action. In 2019, I did a ton of live action stuff and wasn't really animating. And I picked this back up when I'm preparing the films for the channel's monthly uploads last year in preparation. I was like, let's finish this. It could be cool. And then lost a bunch of files, and it's been a chaotic video. Kind of spoiled you guys because there's a lot of stuff happening, and there's multiple characters, and there's like movement, and some of the next videos might not be quite so exciting. So threw this one out as number 2 just right out of the gate. But it's quite old. It's a little janky. It's like I just want to see it finished to the best of its ability. Doing the audio, oh, I could talk for half an hour about the audio. Hated it, absolutely hated it. Best thing about Rotoscope is you don't need like voice actors. Typically, if your background isn't making any weird sounds, you just use the sound that the voice actors are making, right? You use, or the actors, you just use their lines that they're delivering right there, and you should have a boom mic and whatever. But the sounds that these swords make, as we all know and love from the original material, I wasn't going to replicate those with like the reproduction sabers, because you're still going to hear like the clacking of the plastic. And I knew that all of the sound would be done in post. And I'm not a big fan of that. I had to try to find sound effects on all kinds of different websites or pull it from YouTube. And it was kind of a disaster. And then like, if there's not a ton of other background noise, you kind of need footsteps, and you need the sound of them like falling, and white noise. And didn't enjoy doing the audio. That was one of my personally least favorite parts of working on it. Was just, I gotta sync up all this audio. I had 1,000 audio layers. I will not show you my Premiere workspace, because anyone who's edited anything ever will think I'm a complete amateur. Maybe it's because I am, because my workspace is terrible. And trying to do all the sound was, not a fan, but I like how it came out. So it was worth it. I shouldn't say I hate it. It's just, I do like doing stuff with audio. I mix music. I do a lot with audio. I just, for this particular project, I wished I would have picked something a little easier. Could have done like a medieval duel and got some like reproduction metal dueling swords and just used natural audio. Except in the actual video, there's probably sounds of cars going by, because we were right off of the main drag of one of the largest cities in our state. So you're going to have cars. Great little video for February. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you haven't seen it and you're just clicking on this, go on our channel and go look at last week's video called Saber Duel. If you're just clicking on this after this video dropped, next week, the 3rd Saturday of every month, we do a discussion video just talking about filmmaking, animation techniques. And the last Saturday is always kind of a wild card, a little behind the scenes, the making of. Do you want to do live streams in the future? I have terrible internet, so that's not going to be a thing as of right now. So thank you guys all for watching. If you enjoy animations and videos about animation, and channels that don't just talk about and review animations and talk about techniques and give you tips, but actually produce animations on a monthly basis, consider giving us a subscribe, like the video if you enjoyed it. There's new stuff every week. And of course, this is instead of the gifts.